We're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm Owen Bondurant. I am a partner in Independent RX. Today we're doing a webinar on maximizing the cash that you receive from the sale of your pharmacy. So we're gonna talk through some strategies and things that will affect that. Just a couple housekeeping things. At the end of this, Tim and I will put our contact information in the chat along with our website if you need to reach it. We are also recording this webinar. It will be reposted on our website and social media channels along with emailed out after the webinar, probably sometime tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce, again, my name is Owen Bondurant. I'm a partner in Independent RX. I also am a partner with Tim in two pharmacies. We have a compounding, a long-term care, and the compounding has a retail front to it. Our company, we do several things. Today, we're talking about helping people selling pharmacies, but we also help people start and buy pharmacies, and we do accounting for hundreds of pharmacies as well. Tim, if you want to take a minute to introduce yourself as well, that'd be great.
Thanks, Owen. My name is Tim Clark. I'm a third-generation pharmacist, and with Owen, a partner and founder of Independent RX Consulting. Our company started with our pharmacy business. We have started about 30 pharmacies for ourselves, and currently we have, as Owen said, a long-term care pharmacy and a compounding pharmacy with some retail. And our big thing that we do is we help people buy pharmacies, start pharmacies, sell pharmacies, and then we provide ongoing support with accounting and tax planning and data analytics for pharmacy owners. And my experience, like Owen, both of us started working in with our dads. Actually, his dad was one of my main partner in the pharmacy business, and then Owen bought his dad out. And Owen and I kind of have a similar background of working in the pharmacy since we were kids, doing about every job you can think in pharmacy. And that's kind of given us the continued passion for this business. And we can at least say change is good in our business because it allows us to think and be creative. So we'd like to share some of those things with you guys. And thanks for jumping on the call with us.
Yeah. So I think one thing Tim left out was that, he did say that he's had 30 pharmacies over the years, but relevant to this is that he's also sold 28 of those. So he's actually been where many of you are thinking about going. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, he's had to meet with his advisors and team to figure out how he maximizes the cash out of a sale, or if that was even his goal of the sale. So that kind of led us to some of the topics today. And kind of the concept here is, we go to sell our business and let's say we sell the business for $700,000 plus inventory, and then you get to keep your cash and your AR. And let's say that's like $1 million. Well, the thing is, typically you're not going to keep $1 million. So the total sale price was $1 million, but you didn't actually get to keep that. And there's things that cause that, right? So, upon the sale, we sell, the buyer pays us for the inventory, but then we have to pay our final wholesale bill, right? We have to pay for payroll that we've accumulated, right? We have to pay taxes, and there's lots of different things. Those are kind of the big things, but there's lots of things that impact your take-home cash at the end of the day, because many of us are trying to sell our business to retire, for example. So we have a retirement amount that we feel like we need to get in order to go into that retirement, or we need a certain dollar amount to make another investment. Well, if we sell for $1 million, we want to make sure we actually get the amount we needed for retirement or for that other investment. And so we're going to talk about some strategies for that today. Anything you want to add there, Tim?
Well, I think back to your scenario that if you sell your business for $1 million, which it includes basically we're saying you get to keep your inventory and your accounts receivables. That let's say it adds up to $1 million. It's really not $1 million that you end up keeping. So if you've got a goal of what you're trying to accomplish, you've got to factor in, as much as you can. Some people factor in, they just say, if I'm going to sell for $1 million, I'm going to have a 30% tax bill, blah, blah, blah. I get to keep $700,000. But even that is kind of a really simplistic way to look at it. You've got to look at what the fees you've got, debts you've got, contracts you've got. There's all these things that we'll talk about that kind of change that number, because you've got to pay these things are part of the sale. Now, the good part about it is, like anything you pay is going to be, let's say, an expense is going to be a deduction you're not going to have to pay tax on. And then, as Owen and I were talking earlier, getting ready for this call, then you've got accounting things that you've got to talk into, like your basis of your company, and like what is your tax threshold, and what sort of equipment. So is there anything that you're going to have to recapture for taxes? So it's not as simple as what you first think of what you get to keep.
Yeah, so I think we're going to break this down into a couple of different areas, right? So we're going to break it down to things that, like, as you're coming up to actually sell it, that you need to think about. So, okay, I'm a month from selling. What are the things I need to do, right? And we're also going to talk about the things, okay, I'm 3 years from selling. What do I need to do now to impact this whole thing? So maybe let's start, Tim, with the stuff like, okay, I'm selling in a month. And let's talk about maybe some of the bigger items that can impact this. So, obviously, like things like debt, right? If you owe 100,000, well, if you sell for $1 million, you're now going to have 900 because you have to pay your debt off. So you need to think about that, right? Basis, right? And taxes. So maybe if you want to, can you maybe talk to them about, what, because you said, okay, in simplistic terms, $1 million, right? And I get taxed 30% at 700. Well, that's not actually true. And maybe the message is that we just are telling you to go to an accountant, but maybe you want to give them a little context around that.
Well, the thing that your accountant can give you are, again, like you're going to have expenses that are going to get deducted from that $1 million. Basically, is I think why you want to be clear to figure out your tax implications, which could be, again, significant or not significant. However, every dollar, and I think, as Owen and I were talking about, it's really not dollars that we're adding up now. We're talking about saving $1,000 bills. Everything you do really is creating $1,000 bill. And when you're into the thing that now I'm retired, what didn't see, like that $1,000 bill may not have felt as important when you're an owner. When you're retired, it really feels like a $10,000 bill instead of a $1,000 bill, because I'm trying to save for my retirement and things. I'm not going to use that money now, and I'm hoping that money gets compounded into the future. So as much money as we can save and know that we're going to save is really important. So the basis of our business, we see a lot of owners, which again is typical. You kind of take as much money out of your business as possible. So if that's the case, I mean, it will impact your basis, which may mean that you basically are taxed on the whole thing because you've already taken the credits you could, or you've through Section 179 or different vehicles have depreciated things that aren't going to be in the transactions. So that I think the whole point of that is that, knowing that these are possible things that kind of come off that $1 million. It's not like right now we have to tell you to go find out what those are, but as you're preparing to sell in the near future, those are the things that they're like housekeeping things that are going to happen at closing. You're going to know that I've got to pay this stuff, and the less, I would call them I don't know, an aha moments,
Yep.
the better I did.
Yeah.
Because
And
the more
yeah.
aha moments I get, then I can get mad because that $1,000 bill I thought is now going to somebody else.
Yeah. And some of those things, like we talked about, debt, taxes, legal fees. So you're probably going to have a legal fee at closing, right? You may have to, you don't even think about like small debts, like paying off a car, right? Maybe that'll pass on to the seller or to the buyer. I don't know, but that's something you got to think about, right? If you owe 5 grand, well, now suddenly you've you've paid that off, right?
Well, or
Wholesale debt.
automation. I mean, it
Yeah.
could be the automation. Now, like again, you might have the automation and service, so you've deducted the whole thing, right? But you need to have $200,000 go to pay off that note, or $50,000, whatever it is. Like there's some cash needs that you're going to have to expend that you didn't think of. Like even let's say if you switch from like pharmacy systems and you still owe, let's say Pioneer $7,000. We have clients that you know that they're progressive and maybe they've used RX30 or something else forever, and then they switch to a new service and they still owe money on it. I mean, those are things that you've maybe, and again, I don't know if um, your tax strategy, and this is what this is not the call, but those are things that you need to figure out. So for us, we're trying to help you figure out how much money do I get to keep,
Right.
and by knowing those things can also let you set goals and understanding so that again you're an educated seller.
Yeah. Yeah. And the next thing is that, and what he's saying is just write down the things that you're going to have to pay for when you close. And you may need to talk to your accountant or what have you to figure that out. The other things that can impact you while you're meeting with that accountant is just things like stock versus asset sale. Um, Depending on the type of corporation you are, you may want a stock, you may want an asset. And does it make is it typically a massive, massive tax difference? No, but it could be 20, it could be 30, it could be $50,000, right? And we start adding these things up and it could impact also the allocation that's there. So when you sell your business, you have goodwill, you have fixed assets, you have inventory, you have non-compete, you have all these different allocations of how it's sold. Well, you get taxed different on those things, or you could be taxed different. Now you need to, again, meet with your financial advisors and accountants, but these are the questions that you want to be asking to understand what the implication is of those things, because it also could factor into your negotiation of the pharmacy. Okay, so like if you have to do an asset sale and that causes you to pay more taxes, well, maybe you need to get more for the business in an asset sale. And if you don't know that, then you're going into your negotiation completely blind. Okay. So sitting down and other things like C Corp look backs, or if you're a C Corp, you may be taxed different. If you've done a C Corp conversion in the last 5 years, there can be built-in gains. So these are just things you've got to be thinking about as you're doing your purchase agreements and negotiating your the purchase price and how it's structured. Okay.
And all those things, Owen, I think you're talking about are things that you're going to do, as you're entering the sale process or about to
Uh-huh.
sell. You know,
Yes.
the things, for instance, you may have not looked at your accounts receivable in years and you've just assumed it's okay. You're going to want to start to get a handle of what your accounts receivable and understanding what the cycle is, so that you can guess again how much money is available for that. Or if we've got a payer who isn't paying, I just didn't notice. There's some decent systems out there that are better than what they were even 3 years ago that can help you with that. None of them are absolutely perfect, but we got to make sure that you've got a handle on that, because that'll also affect, like, let's say, depending upon how your financials are derived. I mean, whether the profit that you're showing last year or this year, because I mean, it's, all the, I'll call them games that we make so that we don't pay taxes can actually influence a decreased sales price. So again, like, this accounts receivable number, you may, I don't know, you may fudge it for one method, but here you need to know what it is. I mean,
Right.
so working on it. And then I think, even, a lot of people still have their private house accounts. Like if you know that you're about into a sales cycle, start figuring out how to get those ready. You may have payers that, um, I know that we had a client in our long-term care business that no one even noticed that had been a year since they paid, because no one really spent the time looking at it, because the cash flow seemed okay and no one was really into the details of it. And the reason I tell you to get in the details of it now is because, again, that can lead you to more cash that you get to keep.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because so your clients will give you the cash when it's yours, but when it's now somebody else's, they don't really care as much, and you may not get it.
Yeah. And, a lot of us will be like, oh, Caremark, it seems like the Caremark payments are low. And then 6 months go by and they eventually pay you. They find but now you're selling your business and that money is now gone. Right.
Yeah.
And same goes with DIR fees. Like you need to understand what are your future DIR fees going to be. Right. Because that's now going to be deducted from your payments. Right. And I mean, the seller may even send you a bill for them because they're not theirs. So what are those going to be? Right. And you may need to set some money aside for those. Um, that brings up other things, Tim saying AR, like, yeah, calling all those charge accounts, getting paid. Right. But other things that affect AR as you're getting closer to sale is like clearing out your will call bins. Right. Like pushing those. I know we have to do them every 14 days, but like get those out because you're keeping the AR probably. So like get them out. Right. Um, push those out, get them delivered, get them signed for, collect the copays, right? Because though the seller owes you those things, they may not be as aggressive to get all those signed and out, right? And these things sound small, right? As Tim was saying, it's like, oh well, if I don't get 4 will call bins out, like, yeah, but what if there's $1,000 in each one, and now suddenly it's $4,000, or what if there's $200 in each one and it's $800, and then we didn't collect on those charge accounts that we could have picked up another 1,000, and then we hadn't done the allocation right, and that cost me $5,000. Well, now suddenly we've got $9,000 less in our sale. And yeah,
one of the big things that you and I have talked about, Owen, is the how inventory plays such a big swing in terms of your accounts payables, your assets,
mm-hmm.
and really, as we were talking, it's important when you're considering to sell. It's really important all the time, frankly, but it gets important at crunch time too. So, like, we need to know, like, if we're going to market your business for sale, we need to know what inventory is needed to sustain your business. Now, the person buying it, you got to think about, like, is going to need to borrow whatever. If you've got $150,000 of inventory, it's easier to get a loan for $100,000 than $150,000. So you might have the cash, or you don't have perpetual inventory or whatever, that that you're just looks maybe sloppy or not into it as much. That you can get all those things rectified so that you can keep more of your money on the inventory side instead of paying it out. Even paying out a payable is, in my head, is keeping your money because I haven't paid for it yet.
Right.
And that really starts right when you're looking at selling, because like that person who's getting a loan, again, back to, let's say we're going to sell your business for $1 million, maybe that in your head included $200,000 of inventory. Sometimes $1 million is a threshold that a purchaser doesn't want to go. Like a buyer may say, "Oh, I don't want to spend 950." Well, did you really know that 950, if you had 100,000 instead of $150,000 with inventory, they look at it as like one big number. They don't look at it as $150,000 of inventory, because to them they're getting a loan for this whole bunch of money. So if you can decrease the amount of money that they have to give you for you to be happy on the sale, that's actually a win-win. And
Yeah.
and you can do that now.
Yeah, and I mean, to take that even a step further, your buyer's not going to want to buy things that are expiring, things that have been sitting there for a year. They don't want to buy inventory that they're not going to use, right? So like, do a better job, get that stuff returned, return what you can return, right? That is not needed for, the immediate future. Even things that have expired that you can get back to the return companies, right? To get those back. Things that have been sitting in your OTC for a year, like fire sale them, sell them for half price, because your buyer's not going to pay for it. You've already paid for it. Like, go get those dollars, right? Get them out the door, because your buyer will be happy and you get some cash in your pocket.
Yeah, it's almost looking at it. One of the things that Owen and I usually explain to someone when they're looking at selling their business, it's like selling your house,
Yep.
right? That you know, and this is as we're looking at selling your business, you're going to sell it to somebody else. It's almost closer in some ways to an estate sale. Where again, those greeting cards that have been on my whatever my floor for so long, and I spent $6,000 over the last 3 years buying that crap. But now, like, if I'm going to go sell it to that other guy, he's not going to buy them because, hey, they're dirty, they're old, or whatever. But it's possible for you to decrease your inventory and turn it into cash. And that's really what we're saying about almost everything, right, Owen? Is like, how do we turn all this stuff that's on our shelves into cash? Because frankly, even if it's a chain buying it, they're just paying money for your business. They're not into the, oh, well, it cost $30,000 for this new car. They're not into the robot being $150,000 or whatever. They don't see it that way. They assume that you have this equipment and these facilities to support this $1 million business. So you, as you're getting ready to sell, I mean, your job is to, in some ways, we start into the, I'll call it profit taking mode, where,
Yep.
okay, how do I get the money out of the business that's on the shelves or in my store?
Yep. No, that's really good. So, I mean, it's outside of what you're normally used to doing, right? You're used to going, I'm going to be running this business tomorrow, so I'll buy that deal. Well, now's not the time to buy that deal. Like, you've got to get that stuff out. And the benefit of some of that is like, if you start doing it early and you start getting some of the old stuff off your shelf, and I mean, it makes your business look nicer when they visit. Like, so people may want to pay more.
Well,
Um,
and that's the same thing back to our, housing analogy we usually use, Owen, is it's the whole thing that you've got to stage your pharmacy. These things that we're talking about, bad inventory, excessive OTC inventory, all those things make your store look bad. They do. I mean, just like, that your shelves haven't been dusted, or your windows are dirty, or you got too much crap on the counter, and that you just look disorganized. I mean, you've got to think about it as, I want them to like it. You know,
yeah,
the senses aren't just black and white. Here's how much money I make. The senses are, oh, it smells good in here. It looks good. It feels good. Most people that we see in these transactions on buying or selling, you would be amazed of how much of all this is emotional.
yeah, yep. And it's kind of like when you go to a house, like you go to this house, right? And it's in this really nice neighborhood, and you go inside, and it's got a kitchen from the 80s, shag carpet and wallpaper. And you're like, okay, this neighborhood is $1 million neighborhood, but this house doesn't really feel like $1 million. And so then you're like, I don't know if I should be paying this. And what you want to happen is, oh, this pharmacy's in the type of neighborhood, like I can see why this pharmacy's successful here in this neighborhood. And then they want you to walk in and go, and I also see why people come in here. Right. And that's the feeling that they've got. And this seems like kind of crazy, you guys, but like, again, going back to our thing of $1 million. Well, in the negotiation, if you go back to them and say, well, I want 1.1, well, they may pay 1,050,000 because it feels like they should. Right. And so these things start racking up of, managing that inventory and making it look like it's worth a little bit more. And, cleaning out your AR. I mean, suddenly this is turning into hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cash. Right. And so preparing for these things and spending a little time on it will lead to more cash at closing.
And sometimes when you're looking at, an exit strategy and preparing to sell, we always talk about your employees.
Hmm.
And and the reason I'm going to bring that up now is because a lot of us have, and this is our advantage we sell ourselves on, is that we have better service. And it's true. Independent pharmacy, community pharmacies tend to have the best service compared to a chain. However, you and I as owners, we pay for it. I mean, you don't walk into a Walgreens, a CVS, a Kroger that's ever going to be staffed like you and I would staff a store. And that's just because our expectations were different. As you prepare and you look at it, you've got to look at your staffing and think, okay, what do I really need? So two things, one, Owen, you're familiar with a transaction we were involved in where, the owner had way too many full-time equivalents and too many tech and out front hours. And your dad and I, we couldn't buy it because we didn't want to be the bad guys coming in as the buyer and then letting people go. I mean, like you may be required as the seller to shore up your staff of and maybe it's dead wood, loose wood, maybe it's family wood. I don't know. It's just people that you're paying, but you really don't have to. And if you're able to make some of those adjustments earlier, the point is that you can have more money when you sell it because now I'm not spending money for this future. A lot of times when we're making business decisions, and I know we make this decisions like Owen and I run some pharmacies, and we could tell you if you'd buy it, you'd probably staff it differently than Owen and I.
Yep.
Fair, right, Owen?
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
But that's our choice because we're not looking at selling it next week or next month, right?
Right.
Now, if we were, the advice we'd give each other is we've got to shore this up, or we've got to be able to explain it because, one of the things that, if we're going to sell your business and we're going to try to sell your business and get the most value, we're going to have to add back all the things that we do that the new owner doesn't have to do.
Right.
Right.
And I
Like,
tell you that
so
that can be hard because, I mean, over the course of a 3-year period that a buyer is looking at, like you may not remember, oh yeah, actually I bought my kids this car in 2020 and oh yeah, that's right. I had my friend's high school friend working there to teach them this because they wanted to learn how to about pharmacy, and so I paid them $20,000, but that went away. Like you don't remember in your financials all these things that you were paying for that now in fact will impact the value of your business, because ultimately what Tim is saying is the buyer is going, what is my cash flow? And that's what I'm going to pay you, is what is based on the cash flow. Well, if you have all these other, extra staff because you don't work as often, or because you want to employ your daughter's friend, or you, for whatever it is, that those things cause your valuation to go down.
And then
And
there's,
employees,
good.
yeah, employees also cause other issues. I mean, buyers worry about them competing. They worry about a key employee staying, right? Because they're going, listen, this person has all the relationships with the doctors and the the community and the patients. And if I lose this person, especially in the first year, it could drastically impact the business. And so, that could also cost you money because they may offer you a little lower because they're concerned about it. They may require you to get a non-compete and, pay that person in order to make sure they stay. So, thinking about who your employees are and what, how they might affect that sale is important.
And there's, I think, then there's the things that when we get down to the nitty gritty of actually getting closer to a transaction that we've agreed on a price, then I feel like it's then times when you get near the sale that you've got stuff you really need to get, some of these stuff we've already brought up, you're gonna have to get even better when you're closer to the sale because you literally are saving yourself thousands of dollars at a time. Back to that inventory discussion. I mean, you want to, you don't want to have a bunch of inventory when you sell. You want to, you want to get, back to what you were saying about the RX, pickup bins. I mean, will call bin. They got it. The will call bins have got to, you've got to be working on those, getting ready that there's basically nothing when you turn over the business because that's your money. Whether you call people to pick them up, you have them delivered, you get a credit card, you try to get all your money, from your sales, and you try not to spend your money because, okay, who's responsible for the accounts payable when you sell your business, Owen?
You are.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. The seller is like, you gotta pay all that stuff off unless you do a stock sale. But even then, a lot of times you have to pay certain things off at closing, for things that you've used. So yeah, I mean, maximizing that cash is important. And, other things that can impact all of this is like compliance stuff, right? We've seen recently where, either a Parada is going off of, you know, it's not going to be supported anymore. And so the new buyer is going to have to buy a new one, or USB 800's coming. So, the person was doing compounding and they, we've seen a few times now where they don't have USB 800 set up. Well, now the buyer can't buy those compounds, or they have to go and install a USB 800 lab, which could be $100,000. So keeping your pharmacy up to compliance is extremely important. I've even seen it where, a pharmacy will have 4 or 5 state licenses, which can be valuable. But if you let one expire, now you have one less, you know, you have one less license that someone could then buy and market to. So you've got to, keep your pharmacy up to compliance, or else that buyer now has to make a decision there and either do less business or spend those dollars. So they're not going to offer you as much money. Other things to think about there is, contracts. We've seen several times where, the buyer doesn't want to take on the Parada maintenance because they're not going to do that anymore. We've seen where the seller has signed like a greeting card contract that obligates them to a certain purchase amount for 2 or 3 years. Well, if you're still only a year into that contract, you have to pay that contract out. Retirement plans, those also can sometimes have to be contributed to, or you owe money on them. You have to pay things out. Like there's those things
yeah,
can take
you're
away from your cash.
Yeah, when we first brought this up, Owen and I were talking about how 401k can be a substantial profit sharing money that you've got to contribute out of your profits because it's just an end of business thing that you owe them, right? That yeah, but it's even worse than that. You may have people that still have PTO, holidays or bonuses that you haven't taken care of. So really that whole employee thing,
Yep.
again, is important. Really, you need to know exactly where it is when you close so you know what you're going to owe people. That's true.
Yep.
But
Yep.
oftentimes that PTO, you might be able to get that person to take a day off while you're still paying them. So you got a value or something, like maybe you worked short because that person was gone, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like there's ways that it doesn't have to cost you as much money as just cash at closing.
Yeah. No, yeah. And we have a question that kind of leads to, that expands on that employee stuff. It also leads to another thing that can impact is, what if you were selling to a chain and they're essentially buying files and inventory? Is there anything different to be done? Staff is not an issue for us because we have multiple stores that can absorb the two employees at the store. Um, yeah, I mean, selling to a chain and closing down the store is different. A few things there. First off, they're probably not going to buy your OTC items. So either move those to a different store or sell them. They really just want the prescription files. And frankly, they'll buy your RX inventory, but they don't really even want that. So it's even more important to get your inventory down. Um, in your case, the employees aren't important, but in some cases it can be, because sometimes the chain wants those employees because they can't find them. So they will make it a requirement for you to get them to sign an employee agreement in order to buy the files. And you may have to pay that employee to do that. So that can be an issue. So, um, so it just kind of depends on the situation. That isn't always the case, but that is something that can come up. The other factor you have to think about is your building and lease. The chain's probably not moving into your store. I mean, sometimes they do, but you may have a lease that you're obligated to pay. You may now have an empty building that's sitting there that you either need to sell or lease to someone else. And the longer it takes you to lease it, the more you're just sitting there without rent. Maybe you're still paying the mortgage on it. I don't know. But those are things you probably need to think about. I mean, you've sold to a chain, Tim. What, any other
Well,
differences there?
I think where we started on these cost savings things, what we're talking about, really is going to be the same even if you sell it to a chain. You cutting
Yeah.
down on inventory, knowing what your accounts receivable is, getting all that stuff shored up, knowing what your employee expenses is, what you owe them, trying to use those things effectively is saving you money right now, whether you sell it to me or a chain. Like there's things that when you go through a chain transaction that they don't care about, and really the things they don't care about is how much debt do you have. They don't really care about they care about your lease, but that's going to be your problem. They're not going to have to renegotiate a lease. Like if you sold it to another pharmacist, we've got to try to get them a 10-year lease, typically, if they're going to get an SBA loan or have options for that. So there's different things. When you sell it to a chain, the chain, all they want is a non-compete. Like they don't want any, or a first right refusal that a pharmacy doesn't go in there. They just want to make sure that if they're going to go buy your business, that me and Owen aren't going to go backfill it, which is one of the most fun things in the world to do to a chain. But you're not supposed to. Like, well, we're allowed to, but you know what I'm getting at, Owen. I mean, like, those
Yeah.
are the things you have to worry about, because what they want, they're buying just your lives. That's what they're buying, lives and prescriptions. Now, me and someone else who's buying, we're buying robots, we're buying delivery vehicles, we're buying counters, we're buying fixtures, we're buying a lot of we're buying your home, right? Your Your chain is just buying your property.
Yep.
And they're just buying your, and again, it's not even property, it's intellectual property, I guess, right? I mean, it's really not even physical stuff.
Yeah. So you just got to think about the things that, like, if an individual buyer buys your store, I mean, yeah, you push the will call bins out, you want to get as much of the AR going, but after the sale, people are still going to come pick up the prescriptions. Whereas if you go to a chain, you're closed. Like those will call bins, whatever's sitting in there, like you're just reversing and it's done.
Oh, that's the
So
most
like,
frustrating thing. Like they
yeah,
don't want to, they want you to reverse every claim you've got there.
yeah. And then you have inventory that you're stuck with, or maybe they buy it. But like, it's just gone. So with that, I mean, getting that inventory down, cranking out the will call bins, collecting as much of your AR, that becomes even more important when selling to a chain.
And I think everything that we're talking about, we're not talking about you as an owner spending more money on your business to prepare to sell. We're trying to get you to look at what you're spending in your business so you don't spend it while you're selling to prepare to sell. So you don't know which you're going to sell to, but you have to be, all these things are attributes, in my opinion, that would go hand in hand with either one, because
Yeah.
they're literally saving you money.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking of is, you know, and this comes to just meeting with accountants and lawyers and so forth, seller notes can spread out your tax, but also you don't get that money at closing. Um, Audits. So, going through your stuff that is being filled and making sure the DAWs were done and all your documentation is there, because when you sell it, it's now with someone else and it's going to be harder for you to prove that, yeah, I got that signature. Yeah, that DAW was done. Yeah, that was right. And so that audit could come back and you'll have to pay that back. When you're working the store and you have an audit, you can go grab all those things to make sure your audit goes well. Well, when you're not there anymore, you're relying on someone else to really kind of grab all that stuff for you. And so you may get audited and you may end up paying more than you normally do. So making sure that all those little things are done uh, can increase the amount that you end up taking home over the long term. Now, seller notes are a whole nother thing. It doesn't maximize your cash at closing. However, you can charge interest, and it can spread out, your tax obligation over years, which could or could not be good for you. But you're also taking a risk of not getting paid. So, sometimes people want a seller note because it helps them from a tax perspective and they earn interest on that. Um, so those are other factors. But again, you need to talk to accountants about that. And, an attorney will also help you just make sure you limit indemnification and audit risk and those kinds of things within your purchase agreement. Yeah. What are we missing, Tim?
I don't know. Do we got all these questions taken care of?
Yeah, we sure did. That was about the chain. Um yeah, and you guys, when you go to sell to a chain, I mean, the other thing with them is, they look at your prescriptions that you fill. So the more you fill, I mean, the most likely they're going to pay you more because they'll pay you for those. That's not always true, but like, you want to crank out some prescriptions. Whereas
Well,
you're selling to an individual, they're caring a lot about the profit per prescription, right? So, long term, you may look at, am I making money off of these types of things? Like a lot of people don't make money off brands. So maybe you need to limit the number of brands that you're filling because you can make more money off of other things. So pushing as many of those to generics, maybe not filling them. And let's say you go from filling 55,000 prescriptions down to 50, but you actually make more money with less labor. well, that could be worth more to someone. Um,
And the nice thing about that is it's going to make, again, you more money right now.
right. Yep,
Like it really,
it is.
um,
Yeah,
typically when a few of the bigger chains have a calculation that you have to maintain a certain volume. And our suggestion when you go through that is just make sure that it's not annualized volume that gets messed up. If you're in an area where you've got a transient population here or there, make sure that that's actually going to be what you're going to hit historically, because I've never seen a business have every month be the same as the last month. They kind of all make sense when you put them all together. But if you're, let's say,
yeah,
a $3 million business, it's not like you take $3 million divided by 12 and that's what your monthly sales are. Business kind of goes by weeks, and every 2 weeks, and it goes by cycles with your third party companies, which probably have some sort of like 7 or 14 or 21 day cycles that they're paying you on. Knowing those things as you're going through the transaction can help you maximize your cash. And
mm,
your biggest thing is don't give up trying to increase your business until you're done.
right.
Like
Yeah,
we when we bring people into business now, we talk to them about making sure you do your vaccinations or point of care testing. You know, don't stop trying to grow your business, because it's much easier to sell a business that's growing than a business that's not growing.
yeah, that's a
or
good point.
or or
And
or don't be desperate. Never sell your business if you're desperate, or hopefully you sell your business before you're desperate. Let me correct myself.
yeah,
In our situations of selling, it's much easier for me to negotiate with someone when I don't have to take the deal,
yep, yeah, you're less emotional to
because
it.
because
And
like, who knows, it's like the housing market. Okay, right now it's great to sell a house. Okay, inventory is very low, but if you're overpriced in your area, it ain't going to work. If
yep,
you've got too many specialty drugs or too much of the Ozempic, or you know too many typically of anything, as we're looking at someone buying and selling, that's a risk. Like, let's say you're selling a bunch of ED medicine. Okay, great, that's awesome. High profitability, a bunch of generics. Congratulations, that's great business. Now, if I'm helping somebody buy your business, I'm going to be talking to them about the risk of that going away. If you got one prescriber who's sending you a bunch, there's a risk that they retire.
yep,
That you know there's so many, let's say, layers to the business onion,
yeah,
that it's your hope is to know as much as you can. But if you can focus on, I'm going to run this the best I can till my last day, it's much better than what we see a lot is apathy. And if you're not, I guess my hope is if you're considering do it, it re-engages you to do a really good job these next few months or year that it
yeah,
takes you to sell your business, and a business cycle to sell. You can sell it in a month, to somebody, or you can sell it in 18 months. There is no magic to how quickly some of these things go. It's like the demand isn't the same as selling a house.
right.
However, people do ask us, is there demand to buy a pharmacy? Heck yeah, there's demand to buy
Well,
good pharmacies every stinking day.
yeah, I mean, if you're growing, you're creating profit, it will be worth more. And it also limits things because, we'll see people who are like, oh, I've decided to sell, and then they let their prescription count kind of dwindle down. And as they get a good offer, and then as they get closer to closing, they're like, you've lost 3,000 prescriptions. Like, I'm not paying you the same amount. And another thing to be cautious on the chain side is holdbacks. A lot of times the chains will be like, well, I'm going to pay you $1 million, but I'm going to pay you 700 of it now. And if we retain X, we'll pay you the rest. Well, guess what? They never retain all of that. And so then you don't get the same amount of money. So, trying to avoid those is typically recommended. I mean, every situation's different, but but the thing is, if your prescription count is holding, going up, or your revenue's going up, your profits going up, the chances of those things happening go down because people want your business. And so then you have the ability to go, no, I'm not doing a holdback. No, I'm not, doing this seller note. No, I'm not, um, I'm not going to renegotiate this. Like, you have the power because you have a good business. So those are, if you have that ability to do that, it's a really good point, because you see so many people that get to the point of selling and then they just kind of let it go. And you need to do it all the way through the sale, and maybe even a little bit after the sale.
Yeah, you really, to me again, it's when you make that decision, a lot of people do make the decision that, oh, now I'm not going to do the things I normally do. I'm telling you that you need to do what you did, and you need to do more.
Yeah. And we get it. I mean, you're tired, right? You've been doing this a long time. You make that decision, you get comfortable with that decision, and it's like, a relief off your shoulder, but you need to just push through a little bit longer. So
And that's like our job, when we're dealing with a client, right? Our job is to encourage them.
yep,
Our job, I've, we've, been through these transactions. We know that they're tough and they're emotional and they're hard, but our job as your like consultants is to encourage you and keep you positive about it.
yep.
Our job is to protect you and educate you, and sometimes it's to hold your hand and tell you it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
you're right.
because it is. I mean, it'll be okay. If you run a good business, you can sell it.
Yep,
If you run a bad business, it's going to be harder to sell. That's just
yep,
it's. Think of it as a house. Everybody wants to live in the nice house. People don't want to buy the crappy house.
yep. And that's good advice. And I think, to leave you guys, I would say, you're not going to be able to do all these things, but sit back, understand your business, and do the few things that'll maximize your cash for you, right? And do them really well and better than what you've done in the past. And that will ultimately make a big difference for you. And also, I mean, talk to your advisors, because they can give you some really good information on this that can make a big difference. And we're going to put our info in the chat here. You can also find us at independentrxconsulting.com. And again, we're recording this. We'll put it up on social media and email and on our website if you want to refer back to it. And we really appreciate all the people that took time to listen to us. Tim, any parting words?
Oh, thanks, Owen. Good luck to you guys. If you need us, we're there to help you. Uh, have a great day.
Yeah, thanks. Mm.